Good evening. First and foremost, I want to thank the jury for its service. Jurors perform a fundamental civic duty. Their service is literally the cornerstone of our judicial system. We should all be thankful for the careful attention that this jury paid to the evidence and the law and their time and commitment over these past several weeks. 12 everyday New Yorkers, and of course our alternates, heard testimony from 22 witnesses, including former and current employees of the defendant, media executives, book publishers, custodians of records, and others. They reviewed call logs, text messages, and emails. They heard recordings. They saw checks and invoices, bank statements, and calendar appointments. This type of white-collar prosecution is core to what we do at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In the 1930s, District Attorney Thomas Dewey ushered in the era of the modern, independent professional prosecutor. For now nearly 90 years, dedicated professionals in this office have built upon that fine tradition. A major part of our practice during that nearly 90 years has been public integrity work, including cases involving jurists, local and state electeds, public servants, and others. I want to thank this phenomenal prosecution team, embodying the finest traditions of this office: professionalism, integrity, dedication, and service.
Ridiculous.
They are model public servants.
Shameful.
I'm proud and humbled to serve side by side with them. The 12 everyday jurors vowed to make a decision based on the evidence and the law, and the evidence and the law alone. Their deliberations led them to a unanimous conclusion, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election. And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors.
Wrong.
By following the facts and the law.
Wrong.
And doing so without fear or favor.
Wrong.
I want to conclude by expressing deep gratitude to the NYPD and the officers of the Office of Court Administration for securing the courthouse, all of our safety, making sure that the courthouse and all of the other matters that are important in their own right continued seamlessly. They will continue to be and have always been incredible partners. Thank you.
Do you plan to request a prison sentence? Donald Trump's multiple violations of the gang rule that was in place should factor in that request at all?
The judge scheduled a sentencing for July 11th. We will speak in court in that time. He also set a motion schedule. We will speak in our court filings as we've done throughout this proceeding.
Donald Trump has repeatedly pardoned you personally and members of the prosecution team. Do you have a response to the former president after the trial concluded?
I do not.
In February, decided not to bring a case against Donald Trump. Criticized that. Criticized that in March 2023. Criticized when people really started to understand their case. How do you think of all that now? Seeing the results of that, you kind of put that in context with your personal history.
I did my job. Our job is to follow the facts and the law without fear or favor. And that's exactly what we did here. And
Nonsense.
what I feel is
Shame on you.
Work alongside phenomenal public servants who do that each and every day in matters that you all write about and make the press, and in lots of matters that you don't. I did my job. We did our job. Many voices out there. The only voice that matters is the voice of the jury, and the jury has spoken.
Wrong. God's voice matters, partner.
Many people said the prosecution was masterful and flawless. Just want to know how you feel at this moment. Sorry. I'll let you read. How do you feel?
Mr. Steinglass, I think some of you probably saw him speak for a little bit the other day. So he's done his job, as has this team. And he just told me, tell me how I feel. I think you said that. I will just say, enormous gratitude. You know, our system, I talked about the jurors at the beginning of my remarks. We have a phenomenal system. 12 everyday New Yorkers that listen to the judge's directions. They follow the evidence. You saw them in court every day. They were careful and attentive. And so I feel deep gratitude to work alongside them, to be a part of this system. And I just want to echo that this is what we're doing every single day. I mean, during this trial, just this week, right, ghost gun indictment, Grimaldi's wage theft plea resolution, sex crimes, convictions, all sorts of work that's being done by phenomenal public servants. So we're before you today on this obviously consequential matter, but this is what we do every day. We follow the facts and the law without fear or favor.
If the jail sentence is in the cards, it is likely that Trump and his attorneys would seek a stay on enforcement of that sentence pending appeal. If that were the scenario, would your office object to staying the sentence?
I'm going to let our words in court speak for themselves when we get to the sentencing matter. I'm not going to address hypotheticals. They raise arguments, we'll respond. And I think your question really underscores an important point. This is an active, ongoing matter, right? We have other phases of this going ahead. We will continue to do our speaking about this matter, about issues like that in court.
From day one, kind of the viability of this case has been questioned in all sorts of media outlets, all over the place, including from the defendant himself. Can you respond to any of that? How you feel now that you've gotten the conviction?
So my response again is I did my job. And I think particularly I talked about the history of the office. My personal history, I started as a prosecutor in 2003 in the Public Integrity Unit in the New York State Attorney General's office. I served also in the Public Integrity Unit in the Southern District of New York. These are kind of cases I've done personally, and it's a hallmark of the tradition of this office that I'm proud to lead. And I don't want to go into the whole body of litigation, but we now have a federal court decision ruling on the legal theories. We had a state court decision on the omnibus motions. But most importantly, today we have the most important voice of all, and that's the voice of the jurors. They have spoken. Donald J. Trump has been convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records. Thank you.
Mr. Attorney, your office has been investigating this case since
Are you concerned about retribution if Trump is elected president?
You went to the Supreme Court twice?
District Attorney Alvin Bragg, and over his left shoulder was Matthew Colangelo, who he hired as former senior Justice Department official in the Biden administration, touting the 34 counts, now convictions, of former President Donald Trump. Let's quickly bring in Trump attorney Will Scharf, who was with us earlier. Will, your reaction to the district attorney, what he said there?
I think Alvin Bragg just lied to the American people. He insisted repeatedly that this is a normal case brought in the normal course of business for the DA's office, when that couldn't be further from the truth. There's nothing normal about resurrecting dead misdemeanor business records charges from 7 years ago and bringing them against the leading presidential candidate in the country at the height of a presidential election. There's nothing normal about seeking a wildly unconstitutional gag order against a political candidate, or for that matter, any defendant. There is absolutely nothing normal about this sham of a case. I believe the American people will see through his shallow words, and I believe the American people will support President Trump even more so because of these injustices
Absolutely.
that he's being subjected to by this lawless prosecutor and lawless judge in this lawless New York court.
That's absolutely right.
So for people watching this that may be Trump supporters, what do you say to them? They probably are throwing up their hands or throwing things at the television and saying this is not fair and it may affect the election.
We're not
From the
throwing
legal side of
things,
and fighting the
not
appellate
throwing up our
process,
hands.
what do you
We
say
see it for
to a
what
Trump
it is,
supporter
corruption.
tonight who looks at this
Corruption
and feels pretty
in the
dismayed?
political system and in the
I think
government
it's very
system.
important that we all remember where this comes from. It was Joe Biden himself who said that he would attempt to prevent President Trump from winning the presidency again through quote-unquote constitutional means, meaning the weaponization of our legal system against his political opponent in a fashion reminiscent of the
Absolutely,
Republic
that's
of
what
the
he's
Soviet
done.
Union.
And that's
This
what
all
he's
starts-
attempting
So
to
you have-
do.
Let me interrupt you, Will. You know, we've gone around this block. You have, and obviously you can make the tangential argument and say this looks like it's all connected. Do you have hard evidence that the Biden machine in the White House, the campaign, or the DOJ is somehow directly tied? I mentioned Matthew Colangelo being a former DOJ attorney, directly tied to what we saw here in this courtroom.
I think when you look at all of the litigation going on against President Trump across the country, it is very clear that it is being coordinated out of the Biden administration. You mentioned the former number 3 at the Biden DOJ, who mysteriously quit his job to become a local prosecutor, essentially, in New York to bring this case. We've seen records of Fani Willis suspiciously being in the White House counsel's office, she and her special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, including on the very day that Jack Smith was appointed special counsel. When you look at these cases all as one instead of individually, it is clear as day that this is a concerted campaign of lawfare that's an attempt to take the presidential election away from the ballot box where it belongs and put it into courtrooms across America, which is absolutely outrageous and I believe deeply un-American.
Absolutely, I agree with you, young man.
15 seconds here, Will. Is there a process that you think an appeal is going to win, and how long will that take?
We will appeal this case. I believe that ultimately we will win this case on appeal. This case is replete with reversible error, and we're looking forward to getting down and doing that hard work in the days ahead.
Well, we appreciate your time and the reaction today and to District Attorney Bragg.
And I agree with him totally.
Thanks, Brad.
Well, this has been an historic day. No matter what side of the aisle you sit on, no matter how you think about politics, this is history in the making. It is the first time a former president of the United States has been criminally prosecuted and found guilty by a jury of his peers. 34 counts against former President Donald Trump, who says the ultimate determination will be by the American people on November 5th, and he says he'll keep fighting. We'll keep covering.
Amen. I hope he keeps
fair,
fighting.
balanced, and unafraid.
Let's all say our prayer for him.
We don't need, to shop at Banana Republic from now on? Because that's what it feels like. Yeah, a Banana Republic. I wish there was something to laugh about, but there's not. This is a disgraceful day for the United States, a day that America may never recover from. Yeah, the jury convicted Trump on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in order to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. We'll break that all down for you. But from the beginning, this case should never have been brought. This judge should never have been allowed to sit on the case. These charges should have been dismissed when the first motion was filed by the defense.
I agree.
The jury instructions were fatally flawed. They were farcical. And you don't have to be a former law clerk to know that this was all a travesty. That all along Bragg's case was just an extension of the otherwise doomed Biden campaign. This is a humiliating day for the country that we all love. It makes us look like a joke to the rest of the world. Is this what they meant by the American way? Democrats have shown us who they really are. They don't intend to give up power, not ever. And funny, that's what they like to accuse Trump of. And if this lawfare is rewarded in November, it will mean that never again will you have a real choice in the presidential election. You'll maybe be able to choose between two candidates with minor disagreements on the big issues, but you'll never again be able to elect someone who makes fundamental changes again. Not at our border, not with these wars in places like Ukraine, and not in our economic policy. Think about this. Donald Trump gave up fame, fortune, and a very comfortable life to try to save America from the forces that are trying to tear it down right now.
Amen.
And if they can do this to someone like Donald Trump with his means, it will be very difficult to ever turn this around.
Amen.
At least he has the money and the resources right now to fight the cases that are being brought against him, including this and the appeals that will follow. But most people will never get this far. So are we going to establish a precedent where the president can put his political opponent in jail? Because if they can do this now, this will, I promise you, this will be the new normal. The Democrats are showing you what real power is like. It's the type of power we usually see dictators exercise in China and Cuba and North Korea.
Absolutely.
And if anyone threatens the establishment in the future, the Democrats will use the same playbook. Charge someone like, I don't know, a J.D. Vance or a Ron DeSantis in a liberal jurisdiction on some bogus charges, then have a radical judge hand down jury instructions that will make it almost impossible for a jury not to convict them of something. So these great defenders of democracy would rather ruin the public's faith in the entire American system. They would rather lay waste to the Constitution. They would rather destroy the credibility of the U.S. judicial system than risk the real possibility that the people will elect a common sense populace again like Trump. If you allow them to get away with this, my friends, if it goes down in the history books that Trump was winning until he was convicted of a crime in a liberal jurisdiction, if Trump goes on to lose the presidency, then this will become the model for how the left will hang on to power forever. Now, the left is gleeful tonight, no doubt. You've seen them in the streets, they're cheering, they're pumping their fists. I can only imagine the coming book deal, the 12 saviors of democracy, the interviews on the Today Show, the near orgasmic panels on MSNBC. They're thinking that Trump's the real loser here, but really, we're all the losers.
America
Because
is
if
a loser.
this is allowed to stand, and if these people aren't thrown out of office with an exclamation point, then we will essentially be forced to live in a one-party state for the foreseeable future.
Amen.
The only recourse now is with the appellate process, as slow as it is, but more importantly with you, the voters. And given how things have gone, we'll have more luck with the people. And if this feels bad tonight, think of how you will feel if Biden and Harris win again. So I say turn this dark day into a time to recommit yourself to saving America from these vindictive, far-left tyrants. Volunteer, donate, organize, and even reach out to others who maybe haven't followed this trial. Explain how this reverberates far beyond Trump and how it threatens our ability to effect real political change in the future.
Amen.
Today can't be the end of the line for American exceptionalism, but it will be if we sit on our hands and fall into despair. So don't get mad, get motivated.
And let's all go out and vote. Vote for Donald Trump and vote for Republicans.
U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Jonathan Turley, professor at GW University Law School. Both are Fox News contributors. Also with me, Shannon Bream, host of Fox News Sunday. Andy, I want to start with you on the question of what the jury actually concluded here. And Jonathan, you were touching on this earlier on Fox. You made a point that the follow-on or bump-up crime to make this a felony was never specified in the jury return that came in the actual verdict itself. Although you just heard Alvin Bragg say that this was he was convicted on essentially a conspiracy to subvert democracy. So who's right here? What was Trump actually convicted of by a unanimous jury?
Well, the charges in the indictment, and I guess formally what will go down in the judgment of conviction, are, as you said, Laura, 34 counts of falsification of business records with fraudulent intent to conceal another crime. That sounds dry. what was pitched to the jury, and was really pitched by Bragg publicly in a very peculiar way from the day the indictment was returned, was this basically a scheme to steal the 2016 election. I sort of stumble over that because what's amazing to me about this is Bragg is an election denier, and he wears it like a badge of honor, even as election denial, we're told, is like the worst thing that you can be in public life. I guess it depends on which election it is. But the reason I say it was very peculiar for day one is usually the prosecutor has the narrative that you want to present to the jury in the indictment. It becomes the framework that you plead the charges in. In a very strange way here, the grand jury returned a fairly bare bones indictment which just laid out the statutory elements of this business records crime, and coterminously with that, Bragg put out on his own, not through the grand jury, what he called the statement of facts, which was this narrative about basically Trump defrauding the United States out of what would otherwise have been the delight of having the Hillary Clinton presidency. And I don't mean to be too snarky about it, you just need to read it. That's basically what it says. And it relies explicitly on inadmissible evidence against Trump. It relies as a bedrock matter on this idea that Michael Cohen pled guilty to campaign finance violations, and therefore the fact that there was this conspiracy to violate the campaign laws and thereby suppress politically damaging information was like an established fact. And that's certainly how Judge Merchant treated it.
Well, Jonathan, if that's the case, why did Judge Merchant not allow the former FEC commissioner to testify? If this was such an open and shut case of election interference that was aided and abetted by this so-called falsification of the business records by Trump, even though he didn't personally do that, then why not let the jury hear about what the FEC really was thinking on this matter?
Well, you know, Laura, the problem that I saw in that ruling is not that he said that it is his responsibility to say what the law is. That's true. It's up to the trial judge to give those instructions. The problem is that he never gave the instructions. That is, the instructions he gave did not go into any meaningful detail on what would constitute a federal election offense. It had some information, but it was incomplete. And that's why the defense wanted to bring in a legal expert. One of the most telling things that that expert would have brought in, Smith, is he said, look, not only is hush money not a campaign contribution, that's been long established, but even if it were a contribution, it couldn't have been part of a conspiracy to influence this election because it wouldn't have had to been actually revealed until after the election. So that's just a matter of dates. That's a matter of filings that are in the regulations. It's not a matter of interpretation. The jury was never told that. So the jury heard, because Judge Merchant allowed them to hear, the prosecutors state over and over again that it was an established fact that election violations occurred here and that Trump ordered those violations. That included in the closing argument, and many of us were mystified because the judge had given an instruction that Cohen's plea agreement could not be used to impute the guilt of Trump. And then Steinglass, the prosecutor, repeatedly did that, and Judge Merchant would do nothing about it. That's the reason I don't blame this jury. What they heard in that room and the instructions they were given, probably to some of them made it look like they had no choice but to convict. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure even how much it's worth unpacking this, Shannon, because from the get-go, this was a flawed and novel application of this statute. And we all know as lawyers why prosecutors don't like using novel applications of statutes, especially in high-profile cases, because of the likely possibility of a reversal. But in this case, they don't seem too concerned about getting reversed. They wanted to get to the result.
Yeah, if the result is to get it done and get a, quote, conviction before the election, then mission accomplished for Alvin Bragg. Remember, when he started talking about this more than a year ago, the indictment coming together, there were people right, left, and center who thought this was a very weak case and a bad decision, a gamble by Alvin Bragg, that many of them, including on the left, did not think would pay off. They knew that it was novel, and yet he was willing to roll the dice. We've seen that New York juries and judges have not been friendly to President Trump, so it's a good jurisdiction for them to try something novel. And you're right, there's a good chance, as we've all talked about many things, that this Trump team will put together for appeal. Many things that they can point to, and even if they ultimately win, it won't matter for this election. It gets you months, maybe years down the road to get to that point, even if you eventually get that conviction overturned. In the meantime, it gives the Biden-Harris campaign a talking point to use about a conviction. And for President Trump, I mean, he just did an interview with Fox News Digital, and he says he's never had more support. We see the website that is supposed to be his fundraising arm is having trouble. Is that because it's overloaded by people who want to weigh in now? This gives him that fresh talking point now, saying that the real verdict comes on November 5th. I would imagine him to keep using that language over and over again, and to tell people, if you don't like this verdict, I need you to show up in November.
I want to go back to what I brought up with Andy and also with Jonathan. What Alvin Bragg said tonight, and whether that was really borne out by what the jury concluded, at least what we know about the jury concluded about that bump-up crime to the felony. Watch.
This type of white-collar prosecution is core to what we do at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In the 1930s, District Attorney Thomas Dewey ushered in the era of the modern, independent, professional prosecutor. For now nearly 90 years, dedicated professionals in this office have built upon that fine tradition. Donald J. Trump is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election.
Nonsense.
Do we know that the jury actually unanimously concluded that?
No, that's what they unanimously concluded was the business records convictions. The bit about the conspiracy to steal the election is Alvin Bragg's narrative about the convictions. But look, the victors write the history, and if this gets upheld on appeal, I don't think it will, but if it does, that's how it'll go down in history. It's certainly, Laura, how it'll be written in the press tomorrow.
Jonathan, what precedent does this set going forward for anyone who comes along to challenge an incumbent like Donald Trump? What precedent does this set?
Well, it's not good precedent, and I think that when people, perhaps some who are celebrating tonight, and the celebrations are occurring all around us, I think that some may look back at this and wonder what we've done, because there's great damage here. The reference to Dewey was confusing, in my view. It was maddening. Dewey ran against Truman. He didn't try to put Truman in jail. So I don't see Bragg as a Dewey. I think that this is going to be part of a very troubling legacy for not just Bragg, but for the New York legal system. It's a sad day, and I know that everyone basically fulfilled their narrative tonight, right? I mean, Trump was able to show that there was a political prosecution that gave him very little chance in Manhattan. I think that's pretty accurate. The other side fulfilled their narrative that he is a convicted felon. Those narratives have existed for some time, and the politics of that we'll have to see. But when it comes to the law, I think that we also have to take that leap of faith, to believe that we have a legal system that is stronger than all of this, that the people around here who are celebrating the demise of an individual are going to be disappointed. This isn't necessarily a demise. Trump did not look like he was surprised at all. Some defendants look like they're heading to jail. He looked like he was heading to dinner. I mean, he really did not register it. This is going to be a long road.
Yeah.
And we're going to see how it plays out. But I have faith in the legal system.
Well, Andy, Jonathan, and Shannon, all of you, thank you so much.
Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Travels with Dr. John Stevenson.
Fox News Digital,
Let's hear what the judge has to say
New
here.
York justice system. He vowed to keep fighting. He maintained that the election will be the most important day in the history of our country. And I want to give props to you, Judge, because when I thought I saw one or two jurors on that jury who, I don't know, seemed to me a little bit skeptical of the whole process, you said to me, don't bank on it. This is a New York jury, and those lawyers on the panel would have a lot of influence on the rest of the jurors. Like, this is our area of expertise. Listen to this. But you were right, Judge, and your comment on what you saw today.
Well, you know, it's a sad day. I think America went over a cliff today. I think the indictment alone, but now the conviction of a former president of the United States on 2 dead misdemeanors that were resurrected to life by a judge who was not taken out of the wheel, but literally picked out because of his anti-Trump bias, and a case that was advanced before the election, as opposed to those defendants who were in jail waiting for trial, whose turn it is to go to trial, and the fact that they had a magic show where they literally resurrected these misdemeanors and brought them to life through a felony that none of us knew anything about, with a judge saying you don't have to be unanimous on the specifics of whether it's a federal election campaign violation, a federal tax crime, or a bookkeeping crime. And so we'll never know which of those it was. And of course, they had no jurisdiction over those cases either, Laura, and I can go on and on. But this was a magic show where they basically said, but look over here, we've got Stormy Daniels, and isn't she interesting? And look over here, we have, you know, Michael Cohen, and he was convicted of a federal election campaign violation. And David Pecker, he had a non-prosecution with the federal election campaign people. And as a matter of law, Michael Cohen is aiding and abetting in the same allegations that are defended. So what the judge did, he gave the jury no choice, Laura. What he said was Michael Cohen was aiding and abetting in the same allegations that this president is charged with, or this defendant. And so the jury did what they thought they were supposed to do, and they brought back a verdict, which is not only a sad day, Laura, but what it does to me as someone who's done this for a living for 32 years, it reminds me of the power of indictment, the power of a prosecutor. And when we have
I know that power. It can drain your blood. And you, unfortunately, when you don't have money to fight,
so that they can assist them with local DAs, we've got a kangaroo court. But make no mistake, I still believe in the system, Laura, because I came up with it. This case is riddled with reversible error, and it will be reversed, but after the election.
Well, how about, yeah, you can imagine, given how this has gone, I mean, I think people are wrong to assume, Judge, that they're not going to try to put Trump either behind bars or basically geofence him in so he can't really campaign, and he needs to ask permission every time he wants to do a rally, and then that permission is, oh, I'll get back to you next week, or it'll be tough probation until November 5th. I don't put anything past them. So you have more faith in the New York judicial system, perhaps, because you grew up in it when it was truly the great DAs, DAs who had a storied history of taking down the real criminals in the city, not this nonsense with this novel application of the law. But I'm very concerned about this attempt to remove Trump from the campaign trail when he's cutting through with minority voters, especially in places like Chicago, Philly, and maybe even in LA, which I know the Trump campaign wants to do an event in.
Well, I think that, look, this judge has set July 11th as the sentencing date. The judge can do any one of a number of things, but this team will ask for bail pending appeal, and if it isn't granted, they'll go to the appellate division to get bail. This whole thing has been about locking Donald Trump down. Laura, you're a trial lawyer, you and I both know that you don't let a jury go for 7 days and say, look, come back after you have a few barbecues over Memorial Day weekend. The whole intent was to keep Donald Trump locked down. And I agree with you, they will do everything they can to stop him. But what they have done is they've awakened a sleeping giant. You know, everybody listens to all the indictments out there. They have convicted a former president of the United States and probable future president of 34 felonies based on a porn, they call her a star, and a serial perjurer, Michael Cohen. He was a linchpin of this. And if you ask an ordinary American, what did Donald Trump do? They won't be able to tell you. And so
That's exactly right.
Is to continue to have faith and support this man as he goes forward, because he's the strongest man I've ever met, Laura.
Amen.
I'm going to repeat it, Judge.